Um, so I put a blog out for a company called We Can Access, I think about 2 weeks ago now. And they asked me to explore SENPI in my setting. And what I found was the biggest challenges that we face for my students, and what we have done to try and alleviate some of the pressures that they're facing and some of the difficulties and the challenges. And I started off by thinking about what my kids come in with, what my students come in with. And when my students arrive, we do what we call is essentially baseline testing, but we don't test. All I look at is what their attitudes to PE are, what their attendance to PE was like in their previous school, and what their engagement to PE was like within their previous school. And I can guarantee about 9 out of 10 of the students will say they hated PE. They couldn't stand it. Some of them say that the smell was too bad. Some of them say that the idea of getting changed near people was just horrendous. The idea that you would have to run around, and I can't run because I'm not able to coordinate myself very well. So I'm really self-conscious about being able to do that. Or everyone else is able to move around as if they know what they're doing. And I don't know. I can't figure it out. And I come with a lot of students who, for want of a better word, are damaged with their perception with PE. And they feel that it is let them down. They feel that it is a subject that they will never be successful with. And that's really difficult. And it's really saddening, actually. And I think it's no fault of any teacher, any single one teacher. But I feel it's an issue with the facility and the understanding that people have got in terms of actually being able to support these students, as Anthony and Vic said, trying to support these students within a mainstream setting. How do you do that? So it probably does not surprise people that research has shown that the SEN students are most likely to disengage from PE. 43% of them believe that taking part in PE, they don't want to. They feel that they can't do it as well as their peers. Of that 43%, 33%, as well, a third of those who say they don't really like it because they can't do it very well, blame their disability. And they feel that their disability holds them back from being able to take part. Now, I think that is really sad statistic, that they feel held back by their disability. And the research that was very kindly collated by DFE, actually, it's one of the links at the end, identified some of the main factors are, as Joe said about inaccessible facilities. Sometimes you don't have a choice. Sometimes you're sort of held back by the school you've got, by the facilities you've got access to. But inaccessible facilities or equipment hold students back. Inadequate staff training. This was a really big study. Inadequate staff training came out as one of the main things. It baffled me. Poor programs and curricula. So they felt that the curriculum wasn't able to cater for them. And then the last area that they picked out, which when I was making notes in preparation for my blog, but also for this, I put a massive Y next to, was that general non-compliance. Now, the reason I put a massive Y there is because there's always a reason for the non-compliance, or there's always a reason for the poor behaviour. It's not just, they can't be asked. It's actually, if you go digging, there'll be a root cause to that. And it's having the time and having the resources to be able to go and find out what that reason is. And it might be a really small thing. It might be that, the changing rooms are really smelly, so don't want to get changed in the changing rooms. All right, that's fine. That's an easy fix. We'll find you somewhere else to change. Or it might be I had a disagreement with my friend 3 weeks ago in PE, and it's really concerning me still, and no one's addressed that. So your general non-compliance that's a quick fix. You tick it off because you go hunting and find the answer, and all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, there we were. So I'll just quickly talk through each of these areas, And I think we can all agree that competition-based learning, I know YST Youth Sport Trust has done quite a bit of work recently on reframing competition. Don't know if anyone's come across that work they've done. And essentially, this is what I spoke about. So that competition and competitive activities can lead to poor self-worth and self-esteem for all students, especially those with SEN. When we pitch it without proper thought and attention, the more able students are often less inclusive. You know, who wants to lose? I know I certainly don't. I like to win at things. So the more able students are often less inclusive and given the desire to win and be the best. Obviously, unfortunately, given the communication difficulties, they're not able to voice the fact that they want to be involved more. You know, you'll see students, and this is what I was saying about how students coming in saying, "Oh, well, I didn't know how to ask for the ball," and we just look at that and think, well, that's a really obvious skill. You know, you're running down and you go, "Oh, yeah, pass the ball," and the ball comes to you, or you know where to play out to. Those are sort of social cues that we're able to witness, we're able to come across, we're able to figure out what's going on, whereas those students really struggle to sort of get the idea of the competitive nature of these sports. And there's a perceived pressure, I think, on a lot of people, on a lot of students, that they don't want to be the worst, whether it be a teen or an adult. So that perceived pressure, a drive not to fail, and it requires a skillful approach to try and sort of get that off and allow those students to still take part and still access and still be successful. So I still do competition and competitive sports where I am. I'm not saying get rid of all competition. It's the worst, and that it's damaging for students. But I think the key consideration for this is, does it have to be the be all and end all? Can you reframe your competition into something different? So competing against yourself, trying to beat your best. I have students who, when we're doing sort of badminton rallies, or badminton serve, and we'll set quite a big square initially, and we'll sort of right, aim for the square during your serve, and you get it in the square. And each time you hit it in the square, you get to reduce the size of your own square. And then you'll try a different type of serve. Right, let's go again. Really big square, smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And they'll look at other people's squares and they'll go, "Oh, well, his is really smaller than mine." Yeah, but he's trying a different skill to you. And it's trying to just change the student's perspective. So don't compare to other people, because that's pointless comparing to other people. Let's look at where you started and where you are now. So a real key part of the sort of competitive side of things is trying to get a lot more cooperation within our sports, and an aimed purpose. Right, we're now going to measure everyone's square, and everyone's square equals X amount of meters squared. Next time we do it, we'll measure everyone's square again, and can we reduce that size even smaller as a net? So everyone is then encouraged to get their own personal one smaller. Not a case of, "Oh, well, mine needs to be the smallest." No, you might want to coach one of your peers, and why are you able to get it down to 10 centimeters squared and they're still at 50? Give them a bit of coaching, help them out, because that's the only way you're going to beat the record you got last time. And it's that through collaboration, through that shared experiences, really, that the students are able to come out of the other side of that, and not completely disrupt and get rid of competitive activities, but just focus a bit more on the sort of cooperation side of things, really. So next area, obviously this came out in the study as well, is about our professional development and experience. Now I trained in, what year did I train? 2014. I did my actual teacher training. And I had 2 days, actually 1.5 days of SEN training. Now, obviously, I was in a lucky position. I did school direct training, so I was already working in a SEN school. So a lot of the stuff I did, I sort of like, oh, well, I already know that bit, and it was completely pointless. It was a waste of time, because they didn't actually make it relevant to your subject, didn't make it relevant to what you were trying to achieve and what you're trying to do. It was just purely, this is SEN, all right, let's move on. And that was the approach. Now, when I finished my training, I went back to my school and I said, look, we need to try and offer something here, because this isn't good enough. They need more. So each year we have Carmel College trainees who are one of the local providers near us for skits and school directs. All their trainees come to our school for a proper full day's SEN training to get them understanding. Now, the Carter Review, if anyone's come across it, in 2015, it's a little bit old now, but I think it's still relevant, identified that the breadth and depth of SEN training for ITT was pretty poor, really. It wasn't really fit for purpose. And I was speaking to some colleagues who work in a different school, mainstream school. I said, well, when was the last time you did some SEN specific training? And they couldn't remember. They couldn't actually remember the last time they did some SEN specific training, which I think is quite sad, really. I appreciate that people have got time constraints, and it's difficult to get time out for CPD. But what does that say to that whole, it was 15%, that whole 15% of students where we're not willing to give them time to go and learn more to be able to help them access education and access PE better. I see people going off to do Cambridge Nationals, get ready events for the teaching the Cambridge Nationals. I don't know if anyone's ever been in one of those. You may as well not bother. But they sort of see it as a day out, but they gain nothing from it. I gain more speaking to people on Twitter than that course could actually teach me, because it's just pointless. And it's reprioritizing SEND on our approach. So I know, Joe, obviously you said that you've got a massive spike and a massive influx of SEND students within your school, and obviously you're here listening in and joining in now, which is fantastic. Do your staff regularly engage in training for SEND, or is it just one of those things that, we just have to sort of muddle through, for want of a better way of putting it, really?
Yeah, the latter, unfortunately. I'm probably the only one that's had any SEND training, and I tend to do all of the SEND work.
Yeah,
that's probably because it's an interest of mine, but yeah, everybody else just kind of gets through.
And then the sort of what then makes me quite, well, I keep saying quite sad, because it actually does make me quite sad, but is then they don't understand why it goes wrong. They go, why did that happen? And I said, well, if you took a bit of time to actually do a bit of learning, then you'd know why it went wrong, and you'd avoid doing it again next time.
Yeah. And people.
Sorry.
No, just that staff that haven't had recent training tend to be a little bit fixed. They've got their ways of dealing with things, and when you want to make suggestions, they just, there isn't time. They can't do that. So they get put into my class.
Yeah. Not who is Galaxy S10? It just says Galaxy S10. Sorry. I'll rename you if you let me know your name. So what's your experience within your school in terms of SEN training, really, for PE specifically?
Hi, that's me. I'm Janet.
Janet.
We, as the PE coordinator, we have some support from our local secondary school, who we brought in for like a PE package, and they try and differentiate the lessons, but they don't always get the time to meet with the teacher to find out all the needs of the class, and even they have had issues with trying to adapt lessons, particularly for some of our autistic children, and we have quite a few children with on the SEMH, looking at M&E HCP for those types of needs. So they often present with quite like difficult behaviour, but there's a deep underlying root for that behaviour. So even then, some of those staff, like the experienced secondary staff, struggle with that as well. So this is when you put this course on Twitter, I thought, well, this would be good for me to look at what we're doing at the moment and how I can help my staff at the moment make their PE lessons better. And some staff are better than others. Some of our school staff, we have some sports coaches employed within our school who do a lot of the PE and support the teachers in class. So they're quite good at doing research and finding different ways to teach PE and get those children involved in a different way, maybe in a coaching capacity or like an umpiring capacity, or they'll make sure, I can see you getting a bit agitated now, just go and have a couple of seconds to yourself, come back into the game when you're ready.
So that's really good practice, you know, in that sense, yeah. And that sort of thing is it in a nutshell, isn't it? You know, just taking that time to go, put the brakes on, take a minute, when you're ready, come back in. It's not an issue. I think some people are very embedded within within the ways, and that you have to, I'm the teacher, you're the student, do as you're told. And that's only going to end one way, unfortunately. Thank you.
That's right.
Okay. Leading us nicely on, actually, behavioural expectations. So we set ourselves up to fail sometimes with PE because we're quite fixed in the way that we'd like to do things. I know that I'm quite set with my lesson routines. If the students have to wait in a certain area before they go in, and then I'll tell them what we're doing before they go in, and then we go in, and that, you know, it's a very fixed routine because it works, and the students get it. And it's the same within mainstream settings, where, you know, it's very fixed. You go in, you get in the change room, you get changed, your teacher will come in when everyone's changed, or you'll come out when everyone's changed, and then you'll say, right, this is what we're doing, you go and do it. And that bit isn't necessarily too bad if you didn't have to get changed. Getting changed is a massive issue for some students. And where I work, we don't insist on students getting changed. If you want to get changed, get changed. If you don't, you're one that's going to be smelly, not me. But it's putting the ball back into their court, really, and start saying, well, that's fine. It's not the end of the world, because I would prefer you to be active and engaged within the lesson and actually doing something than I would you sat there refusing to actually engage because you had to get changed. In terms of actual, you know, within the lessons, there's lots of disruption, lots of movement, and as I think Anthony said it, you know, about other lessons in some respects have it slightly easier, because they're able to sit them down in chairs and nice rows, and everything gets brought to them, and there's as little movement as possible. Whereas in PE, everything's fluid, everything's always moving. And even when you ask kids to stand still for a moment, they're still not standing still, they're still moving, they're still finding the bearings within the space. And it's little things. I remember when I was doing my teacher training, actually, and it was when I was in a mainstream school, there was a kid right by my feet, and he was just bouncing the ball, just on the floor, not really distracting anyone. In my lesson observation feedback, I then got pulled down because I didn't pick him up for bouncing the ball, when actually it wasn't really distracting anyone. Couldn't really care less because still listening. He just needed to be fiddling a little bit. So because it was either he bounced the ball or he ran around the room. And I'd prefer him to bounce the ball because that's much nicer. And it's much better for everyone, really. So yeah, it's we do set ourselves up to fail at times. And we find that the SEN students, the more they're exposed to these circumstances, the more they're exposed to the smells, to the sounds, to the rapid movements around them, the better they are at coping. And they'll eventually get to a point where they're able to go, okay, right, I understand roughly what's happening now. I understand roughly where I fit within the workings of this game, because I've done it quite a lot of times now. And sometimes it's just patience, you know, as Janet said, you letting people have the time out to take their moment that they require to get themselves back into a state where they're able to re-engage. remember I had one student who refused completely to engage. He'd come to lesson, but he wouldn't engage. And any time a ball came near him, he'd be like, "Oh," and he wouldn't know what to do. And he actually couldn't track the ball properly to be able to figure out where his hands needed to go to actually be in a position to catch it. So he was really scared of it hitting him. But all I would do was I'd leave the equipment next to him. I'd explain what he had to do, and then I'd just get on with the lesson. And I did that for about nearly a whole year of every lesson, set everyone off, come back to him, set him up with what he needed to do, and then would leave him. And it was towards the end of the year, and he picked up the kit and he just started playing with it in a really sort of bizarre, novel way. But he was engaging in a way that he felt comfortable. And then every lesson subsequently after that, he would then sit down. He'd still expect me to come with him. He'd still expect me to explain the activity. He still wouldn't really do what he was meant to be doing, but he was moving, he was being active, and he was experimenting because he'd never been exposed to that type of situation before. And it took him a whole year to get to a point where he was like, I kind of think I get what's going on now. And sometimes we feel that we want results now, and we want results to happen now. And it doesn't work like that. We've got to be, it's a long job. And we've got to stick with it and know that we'll get there in the end. And I think some teachers really struggle with that idea that, well, he hasn't done this week, that's fine. He hasn't done it, that's fine. He hasn't done this half term, that's fine. We'll get there. And it's been bravery, conviction, really, I think, is really what I'm getting at. Sensory processing, absolute minefield. So lights, sounds, smells, just everything, touch, space, lack of space, too much space. It's awful. I'm not going to read all of that out because we all know how our senses work. And a lot of students with SEN really struggle to regulate themselves within those areas. My hall is horrible, far too echoey. Luckily, I've got my OT. We've got an OT on site, and luckily she's here tonight, and she can vouch for me that my hall is horrible. We share it quite regularly, but it's like its own little microclimate where all of a sudden it's really hot, but then it's really cold at the same time, and it's not very nice. And sensory wise, it's really horrible place to be. The lighting's quite garish at times. The only thing that's good for it is it doesn't really smell. But that's the only thing that's good for it. but in terms of our students and our students with their sensory processing, it's not just the senses that we would, our main senses as such. We've got to consider our proprioception, their understanding of where they are within themselves. I know that my hand's behind my head, but some students really struggle to understand that their hand is now behind their head because they can't figure that out. They just feel the hand's disappeared. Vestibular and tactile systems, obviously, as well. And touch, think about how much, obviously, when we go back after all of this, touch is potentially going to be off the cards for a while. But tactile and students touching you can be really quite alarming. For a lot of students, we have one who's overly sensitive to touch, so the lightest touch can cause him physical pain. And you're like, I hardly touched you, and that was the issue. You hardly touched him. If I pushed him, he'd be like, oh, it's all right. But if you literally graze him, it's like, oh my God, and it's like a burning sensation. And we've got to consider all of those needs within our lessons, and within the way that we're setting up, the way that we're going to deliver, and what we're going to expect the students to do. And it goes back to that sort of behavioural expectations, really. How can we expect a student who can't deal with the touch to play tag rugby? as everyone else would. You can't. That's setting them up to fail from the very, very start. And obviously the final area, as obviously John mentioned as well, is accessibility. Those with physical disabilities or visual impairments or hearing impairments have a whole different level of needs that are really quite difficult to cater for many schools, just due to lack of facility, really, and lack of equipment to be able to have a correct wheelchair to be able to go onto the grass, to be able to join with the rest of the students, or to be able to have the correct hoists to be able to lift them up onto the rebound trampoline while the others are doing trampolining. You know, little things like that really hinder, obviously, those with the most physically disabling difficulties. And I think in some respects they're the hardest to engage within a mainstream setting. But they make up 6% of those students with SEN within a mainstream setting as well. So it is only a small number of students that we're going to potentially come face to face with there. And it's looking at adaptive equipment and looking at where you can source funding, essentially, so someone can help you fund getting the correct facilities and correct access in place to allow them to still join in. So part of all of that then is sort of 5 key considerations, really. And I've really touched upon them already. I just thought I'd put them all in one place so it's easy to follow. So can we embed more cooperative games into your curriculum instead of competition-based learning? Can we access and explore greater CPD support, SEND? Behavioural expectations, are we able to adjust our routines and procedures to support students? Sensory processing, obviously, can we perform a sensory audit of your learning environment? It's essentially a little checklist, and you sort of go, is it like this? Yes or no? And then it tells you what needs to improve and how you can make it more sensory. What's the word? Nice. Nicer on the senses. Obviously, accessibility. Are all learning areas learning accessible for all